December 5th, 1872. The British brigantine Dei Gratia is making its way through the North Atlantic, bound for Gibraltar. It's early afternoon. The wind is light. The sea is calm. A quiet day after weeks of steady sailing. Captain David Morehouse and his crew of 7 men go about their duties, unaware of the mystery that is about to unfold before them. As they scan the horizon, something unusual appears in the distance. Another ship. Its course unsteady, drifting aimlessly. The Dei Gratia draws closer. The sails of the distant vessel hang limp, torn by the wind. No crew can be seen on deck, no signals of distress. The ship's name, faint but still visible, reads Mary Celeste. Suspicion and curiosity mix in the air as the captain orders a small party to board. 4 men, huddled in a small rowboat, make their way across the calm waters, their eyes fixed on the mysterious ship. The waves are gentle, but the tension is thick. The Mary Celeste waits silently, like a ghost in the mist. The silence is deafening as they pull alongside the derelict. They tie off their small boat and prepare to climb aboard. The ship is deserted, eerily still. No sign of life, no sign of a struggle. Just an empty vessel adrift in the vast Atlantic. Everything in its place. Everything, except the people. This is the tale of the Mary Celeste, the ghost ship that still haunts the seas. In 1861, at Spencer's Island shipyard in Nova Scotia, Canada, a new brigantine was taking shape. Her name, Amazon. She was the pride of the local shipbuilders, the first vessel to be constructed in the new shipyard. Built for trade, the Amazon was designed to withstand the harsh Atlantic, a symbol of hope for the community. Leading the effort of constructing the ship was Joshua Dewis, a prominent shipbuilder, and a group of local craftsmen. Their goal was simple: build a strong, versatile brigantine capable of hauling cargo to ports across the world. The Amazon launched in 1861 from Spencer's Island with the promise of prosperity. Her first captain, Robert McClellan, a seasoned seaman, took the helm. Unfortunately, not long into the ship's maiden voyage, Captain McClellan was struck by pneumonia, a sudden illness that left him gravely ill aboard the ship. The Amazon, still in the early days of her journey, was forced to turn back. But Captain McClellan would never see dry land again. He died aboard the ship, and in a grim twist of fate, the Amazon's first delivery would be the body of her captain. Some called it bad luck. Others wondered if it was a sign of worse things to come. Just months after her first captain's death, on only her second voyage, the Amazon collided with a fishing weir off the coast of Maine. Though the damage was minor, the ship's unlucky streak had already begun to take shape. The following years were no kinder. The ship ran aground in 1863 off the coast of Dover, England, causing further damage to her hull. Each incident, though not fatal, added to the growing sense of misfortune that clung to the vessel. Then, in 1867, disaster struck once again. While docked in Nova Scotia, the Amazon caught fire. What should have been a routine repair turned into a catastrophe as flames spread through the ship. Though salvaged and eventually repaired, the cost of saving the Amazon grew. And so did the questions. Was it just bad luck? Or was this ship truly cursed? Several claims had been filed after each incident, fueling suspicions that the ship's unlucky streak was manufactured rather than fated. By 1868, the Amazon had passed through numerous owners, captains, and rebuilds, her original purpose fading into distant memory. After yet another mishap, a collision near the French coast, the ship was sold to American investors at a fraction of her initial value. It was with this transfer of ownership that a new dream began to take shape, and with that dream came a new name, the Mary Celeste. With this rebranding came new hope, as an American captain, Benjamin Briggs, took command, ready to guide her into a new chapter of her troubled existence. Captain Briggs was born into a lineage of seafarers and was not just another captain. He was a man of unwavering faith and discipline. At 37 years old, he had already spent decades braving the unforgiving waters of the Atlantic, earning a reputation for his skill and integrity. His deep-rooted belief in divine providence guided his every decision at sea, making him both a respected leader and a steadfast navigator. As he prepared for his maiden voyage aboard the freshly rebranded Mary Celeste, Briggs meticulously selected his crew, hand-picked men he trusted to face the challenges of the Atlantic by his side. The ship was set to carry 1,701 barrels of denatured alcohol, a volatile yet routine cargo bound for Genoa, Italy, where Briggs hoped the profits would secure his family's future. For Captain Briggs, this voyage was special. Joining him were his wife Sarah and their 2-year-old daughter Sophia. It was rare for a captain to bring his family aboard, but for Briggs, this journey to Europe was more than just business. It was a fresh start. They left behind their 7-year-old son, Arthur, who remained at home with his grandmother in Marion, Massachusetts, to continue his schooling. On November 7, 1872, the Mary Celeste set sail from New York Harbor. The weather was fair, and Captain Briggs had every reason to expect a routine voyage. But as the ship moved deeper into the Atlantic, the vast, unforgiving ocean would soon prove to be unpredictable. For weeks, the Mary Celeste sailed through varying conditions. At times, the winds were favorable, filling the sails and pushing the ship swiftly along its course. At others, the sea turned rough, with storms and high winds testing the crew's skills. Yet, nothing out of the ordinary was noted in Captain Briggs's logs until November 25th. On that day, Captain Briggs recorded the ship's position approximately 6 miles east of the island of Santa Maria in the Azores. The log showed no signs of concern, no warnings of impending danger, just a routine update on their location. It would be the last entry in the ship's logbook, dated 10 days before she was found. What happened between that final entry and the discovery remains unknown. December 5, 1872. A British brigantine named the Dei Gratia is making its own voyage from New York to Gibraltar, carrying a shipment of petroleum and alcohol. As it sails through the calm waters of the North Atlantic, the crew spots a ship off in the distance approximately 6 miles away. Captain David Morehouse, commander of the Dei Gratia, was puzzled by the sight. He recognized the vessel as the Mary Celeste, a ship that had left New York just weeks earlier. Without hesitation, he ordered his crew to signal the ship. They waved flags and shouted across the water, but no response came. Peering through his spyglass, Captain Morehouse scanned the ship. The sails were tattered, flapping loosely in the wind, and there were no signs of life on deck. A chill of unease settled over him. Something was terribly wrong. Realizing they could wait no longer, Morehouse made the decision. Someone had to board the ship. He selected his first mate, Oliver DeVoe, to lead the investigation. Alongside him were second mate John Wright and two experienced seamen, John Johnson and Charles Lund. These four men would be the first to set foot on the Mary Celeste since it had gone silent. As they paddled closer, the tension grew. The ship looked empty, abandoned, yet it floated with no apparent damage. The sails were ragged, flapping weakly in the light breeze, and the ship's movements seemed unnatural, as though it were drifting without direction. DeVoe, a veteran sailor, had seen many strange things at sea, but nothing like this. He couldn't shake the sense that something was deeply wrong. With no signs of life aboard, the men steeled themselves for what they might find. When they reached the deck of the Mary Celeste, their suspicions were confirmed. The ship was eerily silent. No shouts from the crew, no signs of a struggle, nothing but the soft creaking of the ship's timbers as it swayed on the water. DeVoe led his men across the deck, calling out, but there was no response. The ship was completely deserted. The lifeboat was gone, cut loose, the cargo undisturbed, and the personal belongings of the crew remained untouched. It was as if the crew had simply vanished. DeVoe led his men below deck. Each step creaked underfoot as they descended into the dim, musty quarters of the ship. They called out again, their voices swallowed by the empty corridors, met with nothing but silence. In the galley, provisions for 6 months of sailing remained untouched. Inside the captain's quarters, the logbook lay open on his desk, the last entry made just days before. Strangely, the ship's sextant and chronometer were missing, the vital instruments for navigation at sea. Yet the charts, unrolled and ready for use, remained in place. In the crew's quarters, they found clothes that were neatly folded and the crew's boots lined up in pairs. In the cargo hold, they found 1,701 barrels of alcohol, almost entirely intact. Later, it would be discovered that 9 of these barrels were empty, with no signs of spillage or damage. The bilge held about 3.5 feet of water, a concerning amount, but not enough to sink the ship. They located one bilge pump that had been disassembled, most likely blocked by coal from her previous voyage. Interestingly, the Dei Gratia crew noted that the Mary Celeste's sounding rod wasn't a proper one. It consisted of a small piece of lead attached to a rope, crude and unreliable. This makeshift tool could have given a faulty reading, leading the crew to believe the ship was taking on more water than it actually was. Most puzzling of all was the missing lifeboat. The crew noticed minor damage near the railing where the lifeboat had been stored on the main deck, evidence that it hadn't been torn away by force or storm, but instead carefully lowered. It was a sign of a deliberate, orderly evacuation. As they searched for more clues, they discovered something else. A rope tied to the ship's stern, trailing ominously in her wake. But this only deepened the mystery. With no answers aboard, DeVoe and his men ended their investigation and reported back to Captain Morehouse. Back on the Dei Gratia, the sea was quiet, but the questions were loud in everyone's minds. Why would the crew abandon a seaworthy vessel? What had caused them to flee in such a careful, orderly fashion, leaving behind everything but the lifeboat? Captain Morehouse knew there was only one course of action. The Mary Celeste had to be brought to Gibraltar. To ensure the ship could be delivered safely, he appointed First Mate Oliver DeVoe as acting captain of the Mary Celeste. DeVoe, along with 2 other men from the Dei Gratia, boarded the abandoned ship and took on the responsibility of sailing her to port. While the Mary Celeste was seaworthy, Her sails were worn and her rigging in poor condition, making it difficult for the small crew to manage. But Devoe and his men were determined to sail the ship back to safety, without the need for a tow. Over the next 8 days, the two ships sailed in close company, navigating through rough seas. Devoe and his crew worked tirelessly to keep the Mary Celeste stable. The journey was grueling, not only due to the physical challenge of managing the ship, but also the eerie silence that haunted them as they sailed aboard the abandoned vessel. After 8 days at sea, battling uncertain weather, and navigating a vessel haunted by mystery, the Mary Celeste and the Dei Gratia finally reached Gibraltar on December 13, 1872. The once adrift vessel was now secured, but the mystery surrounding her fate had only just begun. For the crew of the Dei Gratia, there was relief in reaching port, but their curiosity about the Mary Celeste deepened. The ship was seaworthy, her cargo mostly intact, and yet her crew had vanished without a trace. The case was now in the hands of the British authorities, and an official investigation was about to begin. Little did they know, the mystery would only deepen. The ship was brought before a British Vice Admiralty court for a salvage hearing, a standard procedure when a ship was found abandoned at sea. Captain Morehouse and his crew were expecting a reward for salvaging the ship, but the authorities had other concerns. The Attorney General of Gibraltar, Frederick Solly Flood, led the investigation. From the beginning, he was suspicious of the circumstances. He questioned the Dei Gratia crew about the timing of their discovery, wondering if they had come across the Mary Celeste earlier than they claimed. But the men of the Dei Gratia denied any involvement, insisting that they had found the ship adrift just as they described. There was no evidence to suggest they had tampered with the vessel or its crew, yet Solly Flood pressed on with his theories, convinced that something was being hidden. One of the most baffling discoveries during the inspection was that 9 barrels of alcohol were found to be empty, yet there were no signs of a spill. These barrels were different from the others. They had been made of red oak, a more porous wood compared to the white oak used for the rest of the cargo. Unlike white oak, which has tighter grain and is better at containing liquids, red oak allows for more seepage and evaporation. Over time, it's possible that the alcohol in these 9 barrels evaporated or leaked, though slowly enough that it left no obvious residue. But this still didn't explain why the crew of the Mary Celeste had vanished without a trace. As the investigation deepened, Solly Flood and his team scoured the Mary Celeste for any evidence that could support their theory of foul play. For a time, they believed they had found the key to unlocking the mystery, a discovery that could finally solidify suspicions of violence aboard the ship. It was a sword, but not just any sword, Captain Benjamin Briggs's personal cutlass. The sword, found in Briggs's cabin, had a blade marked with reddish-brown stains, initially raising suspicions that it had been used in a violent struggle. Solly Flood wondered, could this be the weapon that led to the crew's disappearance? Had a mutiny or a fight broken out, leaving the crew no choice but to abandon ship? But hopes of solving the mystery were quickly dashed. Upon closer examination, the reddish stains were found to be nothing more than rust. The cutlass, like so many other leads, proved to be just another dead end in a case filled with unanswered questions. Despite his suspicions, Solly Flood could find no concrete evidence of a crime. After 3 months of investigations and court hearings, the case was finally closed. The crew of the Dei Gratia received a salvage reward of £1,700, a mere fraction of the ship's £46,000 value, just about 3.7%. Far less than the typical 10 to 20% that was usually awarded for successful salvage efforts. Clearly, the court's lingering doubts about the circumstances had affected their decision. But the Mary Celeste story didn't end in Gibraltar. After her release, the ship was repaired and sold to new owners. For years, she continued to sail the Atlantic, though her reputation as a cursed ship followed her wherever she went. Crews were reluctant to board her, and some claimed she brought nothing but bad luck. By 1884, the Mary Celeste was sold once again, this time to Captain Gilman C. Parker. Under Parker's command, the ship embarked on what would become her final voyage. Her manifest listed a cargo of valuable machinery and expensive goods, bound for Haiti. But in reality, the ship carried nothing more than boots and cat food. What was supposed to be a profitable journey was, in fact, nothing more than an elaborate scheme: insurance fraud. On January 3, 1885, off the coast of Haiti, the Mary Celeste sailed through rough seas. The sky darkened by heavy clouds, and the wind howled through the rigging as Captain Parker prepared to execute his plan. Gathering his crew, Captain Parker issued unsettling orders: run the ship aground, scuttle her on the coral reefs, and abandon her to the sea. But not everyone was willing to follow. The crew, already on edge due to the ship's cursed reputation, hesitated. Parker, sensing their fear, attempted to manipulate them, claiming it was their duty to wreck the ship so she wouldn't harm anyone else. Despite Parker's words, rumors swirled among the crew, fear that wrecking the ship would add their names to her list of tragedies. As the ship approached the Haitian coast, the tension on board was palpable. The crew felt the weight of what they were about to do. They weren't just sailing into danger. They were about to condemn the ship, and perhaps themselves, to an uncertain fate. Parker barked his final command: run her ashore. With a deafening crack, the Mary Celeste struck the coral reef. The hull splintered as the ship was forced upon the jagged rocks, the crew gripping the railings as the force of the impact nearly threw them overboard. Waves crashed violently against the wreck as the ship groaned and twisted under the pressure. The ship began to break apart, the timbers creaking and snapping under the force of the sea. Panic set in as water poured into the lower decks. Despite the chaos, Parker remained focused on his plan, ordering the crew to abandon ship and ensure there would be no survivors left aboard. As the ship slowly sank into the reef, the crew hurriedly lowered the lifeboats. One by one, they abandoned the vessel, the cold realization sinking in about the act that they had just committed. The lifeboats drifted away, the crew watching as the Mary Celeste, once a proud brigantine, lay shattered on the reef. Her final voyage, a tale of disaster and deceit, came to an end. But to commit such a terrible act on a ship believed to be cursed by the devil, one must pay a heavy price. Within just months of the insurance fraud trials, Captain Parker passed away.
What would drive a crew to abandon a perfectly seaworthy ship in the middle of the ocean? And that's the question that's plagued this topic for over 150 years now. There are a lot of theories, and some make more sense than the others, but let's take a look at a few. First, there's the idea of mutiny. Now, mutiny happens when the crew turns against the captain. But here's the issue with mutinies. When they do occur, they're about control, establishing dominance. A mutinous crew wouldn't leave the safety of the ship with the captain and get into the lifeboat. It just doesn't fit. There's absolutely no motive behind this theory, and we know Captain Briggs personally hand-selected the crew. If a mutiny had occurred, they would have taken the ship, not abandoned it. Now, some people speculate that the crew may have actually gone into a drunken rampage, acting out because of the 9 empty barrels found on board. But here's why this theory is far from the truth. Actually, it's impossible. Yes, those barrels did contain alcohol, but it was denatured alcohol. Drinking even the smallest amount would have been fatal, not intoxicating. I don't really believe a mutiny did occur here. Next, we have the belief that pirates were the cause of the crew's disappearance. And as morbid as it sounds, piracy is a business. While I'm sure there were moments of joy for pirates while pillaging, their ultimate goal was financial gain. In the case of the Mary Celeste, her cargo was left completely intact. Pirates don't leave valuable goods behind. The amount of alcohol alone on board was worth a fortune. In fact, the value of alcohol alone was 3,400 pounds at the time, which today would be worth approximately $600,000. Pirates simply wouldn't have ignored that kind of wealth. It just doesn't fit their motives. We also have to consider and rule out the idea of foul play by the Dei Gratia crew. While it may seem suspicious that the Dei Gratia found the Mary Celeste abandoned, the facts don't support any foul play. The Dei Gratia set sail weeks after the Mary Celeste, making it impossible for them to be involved in the crew's disappearance. The salvage award given to the Dei Gratia crew was about 1,700 pounds, which today would be equivalent to about $310,000 US. Split among 7 crew members, that would be around $44,000 each. Now for most, $44,000 would be a hard price to accept for the risk of committing murder. All the signs point to the ship being abandoned long before the Dei Gratia arrived. And if in fact foul play had been involved, the valuable cargo would have likely been taken, but everything remained untouched. Now I have to mention some more imaginative ideas. Aliens and sea monsters. Now there are theories that the crew was abducted by extraterrestrials or perhaps attacked by a mythical creature like the Kraken. These ideas are fun to think about, but they're more about legend than reality. There's no evidence to suggest anything of that sort happened. If a mythical beast did appear from the depths of the Atlantic and removed each and every crew member individually, we would definitely see damage and signs of a struggle. So what's the most plausible explanation then? The vapor explosion theory to me is the most logical and reasonable cause. Now there were reports from other ships' captains' logs in the area of relentless storms the same time the Mary Celeste was on her voyage. In the case these storms did exist, the crew of the Mary Celeste would have battened down the hatches, basically sealing off the ship to prevent water from getting in. But in doing so, they may have unknowingly trapped alcohol vapors inside the ship. To keep it simple, the ship was carrying over 1,700 barrels of alcohol, and 9 of these barrels were found empty at port. Alcohol emits flammable vapors, specifically ethanol vapor in this case. These vapors are highly volatile and can ignite under the right conditions, giving them explosive properties. If enough vapor built up in the cargo hold, even a small spark, say from friction or static, could have caused a violent explosion. Or at the very least, the crew might have panicked, thinking an explosion was imminent. The fact that the lifeboat was carefully lowered, and that all the important belongings such as the crew's raincoat and gear and food and essentials remain on board, suggests that the crew believed that they could return to the ship once the danger had passed, but they never did. Now if you recall from earlier, there was a rope trailing behind the ship when the crew from the Dei Gratia originally found the Mary Celeste. Now why would a torn rope be hanging from the back of the ship? Well, there's an interesting theory that many believe the crew may have tied the lifeboat to the stern of the Mary Celeste, trying to stay connected to the ship as they abandoned it temporarily, while the ship naturally ventilated itself and ridded itself of alcohol vapors. But it's possible that the rope broke, separating the lifeboat from the ship and leaving the crew stranded in the open sea, unable to return. As for the crew of the Mary Celeste, their fate was almost certainly a grim one. It's likely that after abandoning the ship, they found themselves at the mercy of the unforgiving ocean. With no way to navigate back to the Mary Celeste, they may have drifted helplessly lost at sea. The open ocean is vast, and survival in such conditions would have been impossible for long. The seas claimed them, as it's claimed so many others. And though we may never know the exact details of what happened, one thing is certain. Their story, like so many before them, ended far from the shores they hoped to see again.